for criminal psychology, psychopaths, and serial killers. Pictured to the right is the subject of my case study. This is Juana Barraza, also known as the Old Lady Killer. Barraza's full name is Juana Barraza Sampero. She is a Mexican lucha libre wrestler who would dress as a government nurse to gain entry to her victims' homes. I found her a rather interesting subject for my study. Barraza was believed to be Mexico's first female serial killer, and she is accused of killing between 42 and 48 elderly women. Barraza was active starting in 2002 for a period of 4 years. The murders she was convicted of spanned from 2002 to 2006. It is known that before the start of her violent crimes, she was performing minor thefts, petty scams, and home invasions for the time period of approximately 3 years. Barraza targeted single senior women. All of her victims are between the ages of 62 and 79 years of age. Police originally believed that this serial killer was targeting women by watching them in parks and following them home. This turned out to not be the case. Barraza disclosed in an interview that she was not pre-targeting her victims. Instead, her crimes were a matter of opportunity. Barraza would gain entry to the homes of her victims by knocking on the doors and claiming to be a woman of peace, a nurse, or a welfare worker. Barraza would make her victims feel secure by offering to assist them with tasks such as cooking, cleaning, and personal care. When she entered the home as a social worker, she would often tell them about things like applying for funding for extra needs. So after gaining entry to the home, she would strangle her victims, usually using a stethoscope that she carried on her person. But in some of these cases, she did use other objects, including a pair of women's tights, a curtain cord, and a phone cable. It is very common for her to have lost her temper, and she would fly into a rage and beat her victims badly. Barraza on occasion would also sexually assault her victims, but this didn't happen often. Due to the nature of the crimes, and with no proof of forced entry, police originally believed that these crimes had been committed by victims' families. When community members were interviewed, witnesses came forth with reports of a woman exiting the scene of the crime. Police assumed that this could not possibly be a woman, as a woman was not capable of a crime such as this. It was assumed that this must be a man in woman's clothing. As a result, members of the trans community, transvestites, and transgender people were targeted in various police stings. The hunt began for the serial killer, and they were looking for someone responsible for the death of these elderly women between 2003 and 2005. Members of the trans community were held, fingerprinted, but as it turned out, they were unable to apprehend a suspect. Barraza wasn't apprehended until she was spotted fleeing from the scene of her crime. Her last victim, the tenant of the old lady, was just come home and saw his landlady on the floor, so he started to chase after Barraza, yelling for police. When police finally apprehended her, they believed that she had committed as many as 61 murders. She was formally accused of committing 48 murders. There was only sufficient evidence to convict her of 17 of these. Although she has been convicted of all 17 murders, She has only admitted to one of her victims, being the final victim where she was apprehended. Barraza has been sentenced to 759 years in jail, where she is expected to serve the rest of her life. Pictured below are two of the sketches that were done by the police based on eyewitness accounts, and one is a 3D model of what they believed she looked like. Barraza's early life. She was raised in a small rural community just outside Mexico City in 1956 to a sex worker. Her full name is Juana Barraza Semprino. Her father, Trinidad Barraza, was a police officer. Her parents' marriage dissolved, unfortunately, a few months after Barraza's birth, when her mother entered an adulterous relationship with her stepfather. The community that she was raised in is located approximately 20 minutes from Mexico City and was known to be an area of high crime, and it was poverty-laden. Barraza was not educated from an early age and never learned how to read and write. This was confirmed by her defense team. She has described her mother as being an abusive alcoholic and alleges that her mother traded her at the age of 12 to a local man for 3 bears. The reports of her early years differ according to source, but the childhood trauma is a reoccurring theme. Barraza spent her teen years with her new guardian, experiencing multiple rapes. She eventually gave birth to a baby boy. This led a deep resentment to Barraza's mother. She held her mother accountable for the abuse that had happened. Barraza remained under the control of her abuser until she was 16, when she was rescued by her uncle. While living with her extended family, her uncle and his family, Barraza was informed that her mother had passed away. This was just before her 17th birthday. The cause of death was liver disease. During her late teens, Barraza took a job selling peanuts and other snacks at local wrestling shows. Barraza had always been interested in professional wrestling, and her size allowed her the opportunity to become a wrestler for a local lucha libre show at the age of 20. She was known as La Dame de Silencio, or the Lady of Silence. Barraza spent most of the 80s and 90s with this promotion. She also took on work as a cleaner to supplement her income. Barraza suffered numerous injuries during her career, and when she could no longer wrestle, she left and needed to rely on shoplifting and petty theft. Barraza had very few friendships, but she did form a partnership with a lady named Araceli Tapi Martinez, and together they stole from the elderly as a way to earn money. This relationship, however, ended after Araceli's boyfriend, who was a police officer, caught the ladies. He then blackmailed Barraza. She had to give him all of her money that she'd made from the scheme, and she broke off the partnership. But she did continue to rob the elderly. It wasn't until one of these events when one of her senior victims insulted her and apparently called her heartless and a coward that she became enraged and she beat the elderly woman to death. At the time of her arrest, Barraza had been married 4 times, and all of her marriages had failed. These unions, however, resulted in the birth of 4 children, which she shared with 3 of her husbands. Although Barraza had had a difficult relationship with her mother, it was reported that she had had a stable relationship with all 4 of her children. Tragically, her eldest son was attacked by muggers and later died from his injuries. At the time of her arrest, her remaining children were 11, 13, and 21. The two youngest went to live with her extended family, and her eldest daughter married. Barraza says that she is proud that she kept things going on her own. She is proud to be both mother and father to her children. Barraza made headlines about 8 or 9 years into her incarceration when she found love. Now, that's highly debated whether or not she found love or what the relationship really was, but Barraza did marry for a 5th time. Her husband has been identified as Miguel Angel, who is a 74-year-old inmate who is currently serving a sentence at St. Martina. It's the prison where Barraza is housed. Now, this marriage didn't last very long. It lasted for approximately 2 weeks. And according to reports, the couple only spent a collective 100 hours in correspondence, speaking to each other. Barraza had ever been diagnosed with a mental disorder. Articles I have reviewed suggest that Juana Barraza may have suffered from the following: schizotypal personality disorder, premenstrual dysphoria disorder, she may be bipolar, borderline personality disorder, or antisocial disorder. Now, after reviewing some of her actions and statements, it was surprising to me that she had never received mental health supports. She only briefly met with a psychiatrist when she was arrested, but the psychiatrist gave her no formal definition. As part of our report, I chose to look at fetal alcohol syndrome as her disorder because I believe she suffers from this. I chose FASD, and I understand that without the facial indicators that it can be difficult to prove, but I based it on the assumption that her behavior has demonstrated this claim. Barraza's birth mother was an alcoholic, and I believe that she has suffered related damage to her brain, contributing to her apparent undeveloped appreciation of consequences for her actions. A diagnosis of FAS could also explain her poor judgment and inability to control her impulses when she lashes out in aggressive ways. I have listed some of the common symptoms of FASD, and from this list, Barraza demonstrates poor social behavior, lack of impulse control, difficulty learning, being unaware of consequences, trouble focusing, difficulty getting along with others, display of ADHD tendencies, aggressive without reason, no consideration for the law, difficulty retaining employment, mental health distress including depression and anxiety, shifts in mood, limited memory, making poor judgment or unsafe decisions. The second disorder I chose for Barraza was antisocial personality disorder. This disorder shares a lot of common elements with FASD, and one of the reasons I chose this was the risk of the risk of developing this disorder is increased with having alcoholic parents and childhood abuse. Both of these factors were present during the developing years of Barraza's life. A primary element of ASPD is not being able to accept reality. This person will justify their behavior by blaming the victim. The offender is often unaware and doesn't consider the harmful effects of their actions on others. Barraza resembled this. She blamed her victims for making her mad, just like her mother. So once again, from this list, it's social behavior, irresponsible behavior, does not distinguish between right and wrong, lies often, ignores the rights of others, refusal to take responsibility, trouble showing remorse, no empathy, often angry without reason, using charm to manipulate, theft and stealing, starting fights, substance abuse, and homicidal behaviors. It's quite the list. Due to the nature of her crimes and the target, the population that she targeted, Barraza became feared in Mexico. After her capture, however, she became very popular in the media. The next couple of slides are examples of either documentaries, books, or TV shows that were based on her story. So the first one here you see pictured is Little Old Lady Killer, and this is the only book that was published with the assistance of the killer. She met with this author and she gave interviews, unlike the other books published. So Little Old Lady Killer, and then there was the serial killer, Juana Barraza, and then there was women serial killers, the most notorious female killers of all time. This here pictured, you'll see a documentary, and it was filmed for BBC UK. That's called The Life for Mexico's Little Old Lady Killer. And finally, you may have watched these episodes and not realized it, but Criminal Minds did 2 episodes loosely based on her crimes. So Machismo, which is about a Mexican serial killer who targeted lone old women, and the Mill Creek Killer, who also targeted senior women. Okay, and the last slide is just my references. Thank you for joining me today.